Okay, so let's get going. So the first question was from Allison about weaving, and she was noticing how Harry enters on 2 feet, single foots, then does 2 foot exits, and on the exit he sometimes jumps off his front feet, and his mom always exited the weaves this way. It's almost like a celebration of finishing. Yeah, it's possible it is. And I think that 2 feet going in and 2 feet going out, that is pretty common because the dogs, it's just a way to you know, um, get going on the way in and to get going on the way out. So, about weaving styles, it is so structure and size and stride length related what a dog does, but you can influence it. So, the question is, how much do you want to influence it and how much do you want the dog to do, what comes natural? And here are some things that have been brought to my attention over the years that if a dog is single stepping and the front feet are going really far out to each side, that can put a lot of strain on elbows and probably shoulders too. But I think elbows are the main concern, that they're just so not hyper, but they're so far going to the left and the right. Other people have commented on, well, isn't that better than a dog really curving his spine to weave? And I had to think about that because the way I trained Dakota was to actually weave, not to push the poles aside. And push the poles aside is a common method for creating the fastest weave poles. But one thing you probably know by now about me is that speed is not my ultimate, top one thing that I look for. I mean, I love speed, but what I try to do is pick things that are going to give my dogs longevity and health in the sport. So with him, I thought, no, he's a pretty big guy. I think the bending of the curving of the spine is a better way to do it. And he doesn't shoot out far left and right. So let me just go back a few steps. When he was learning to weave, he was hopping through with 2 front feet together. And the way I switched him to single stepping was by opening the channel. And that is the typical way you get a dog that's hopping through to do that. Something about Dakota that's been true since the beginning is he never really had a lot of power from the rear. So he didn't weave fast. And I thought, well, maybe this has to do with the way I trained him to weave, which was, it's a method that I learned from Sharon Nelson. And it's interesting. I'm not sure I'd do it again, but I'm glad I did it the first time. That she basically puts those composting barrels, slips them over the weave poles, and she just introduces dogs to going through, like they're literally, I don't know where my finger is. There's my finger. They're going through in a very, very extreme weaving way, so they're understanding the pattern. And that, I think, did teach Dakota to bend his spine versus to push off and push the poles aside. I don't know. I don't think that made him a slower weaver. And, in the context of weaving, he's not like a slow weaver, but he's not rip roaring fast either. And I was attributed that to not a lot of power from the rear. So we'll see once he's back to 100% after the TPLO surgeries. If he has more power in the rear, I'll know that was just some really smart, self-protection, taking care of himself kind of thing. And that, that the joints were never really stable. So opening the channel is one way you can get a dog to single step, although now I'm not really talking about Allison's dog per se because he is single stepping. But if you have a larger dog that is hopping back and forth and you want to experiment, definitely open the channel an inch or two. The caution with opening the channel beyond an inch, that you don't want the dog to start single stepping with the rear feet. And, okay, now I got to get him, sorry. Now let's see what Lil has to say. Lil, here, say hi to everyone. Nobody's here? You're right. Okay, let's see how that goes. So single stepping with the rear feet. There was a trainer that was sharing that she intentionally trains her dogs to single step with the rear, thinking it's going to be a faster performance. And that didn't feel right to me. And so I questioned, I said, is that good for the dog's knees and hips pushing off so hard left to right like that? And I never heard back from her. That was the end of the conversation. But I am guessing, based on the fact that the fastest weavers around are using their back 2 feet or hopping through. Now, granted, they will be kind of stride changing left to right as they go through a little bit, but I think it's better if they are pushing off of both rear feet. So another way you can modify the weave pole setup to encourage your dog to do a different style of weaving besides opening the channel is to increase the space between the poles. So for this, you'd need stick in the ground weave poles. You could go like from, instead of 24 inches, go 26 inches and let your dog, oh, hi Peg and Heather. Let your dog open up his stride a little bit. Or if you've got a medium-sized dog and a small dog, you may want to go down, 24 to down to 22 and see what that does. Because I remember when the weave pole spacing went from 22 to 24, that both my terriers had to learn how to weave again with this wider, like they almost had to extend to weave instead of, 22 is quite comfortable for them, and 24 is fine too, but it took some adjustment. So play around with, if you've got stick in the ground poles, increasing the spacing, go 26 for a few reps and go 25, then go 24, and have it on video. And you can, pop the video like in a coffee cup where it's low to the ground, and get your dog weaving, from the back and from the front, that straight on view. And I think you'll learn a lot about, how the spacing of 24 inches, which of course is random again, like we human beings create random spacing or random obstacle specs, and see what your dog does. But again, making sure they don't slip into a single stepping kind of trotting action with the rear feet. What else about weave poles? Let me think. Sylvia Turkman, we're talking like 13 years ago. I remember her saying that when she never practices straight up weave poles with her dog, she always leaves the channel open. She just feels like it's easier on their bodies. She opens it like, I think, an inch. And she said she never had a problem with dogs popping out or anything like that. And I think I agree that if you've got the ability to open up the poles, I think it's great that it allows you to practice entries and exits, independence, and all of that stuff without your dog having to weave quite as dramatically. So that's definitely something I do with weave poles. And the other thing that I think is rather unique about the way I train weave poles compared to most people is I train independence from the beginning by using a mark at the front and a mark at the end. And whatever method you're using, whether it's channel or 2x2 or whatever, that it allows the dog to know where they're going. It puts the weave poles in a context of a sequence, and it gets the handler out of the picture. Because that even the 2x2 method that that you're kind of bowling your dog in and you're right next to your dog, it's just creating the earliest experiences the dog has with weaving has to do with the handler doing something. And so now you'd have to try to fade that out, and it's really hard, I think. So independence from the beginning, using the weave poles with mark before, mark after is, I think, where it's at. And, I know Heather was working on independence where she could peel away while her dogs are weaving. And she doesn't have a lot of lateral space in her yard. So, we were talking about, it doesn't matter really, if you're doing exactly the thing you want to show your dogs, you can do something similar. So in the case of not having lateral distance to kind of shift, go way off in an angle, you can turn dramatically, without actually moving so far, and proof that's kind of motion insane. So I'm going to move on from the weaving, but if anybody has a question about that, you let me know.